Welcome to the Lo'au and World Scholars. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the custodians of the land here in Canberra, especially the Ngunnawal and the Ngāpuhi tribes, and also Her Royal Highness Princess Puloto, who is the High Commissioner of Tonga for Australia, and all lineages, religious leaders, political leaders here in Australia and also in Tonga, and also in Vaihi, where my guest speaker is residing, Professor Dr. Tevita from the University of BYU, Maui-Ta-Va-He-AKo, and all our audience watching from different places and different areas throughout the globe. Today we are going to talk about the topic entitled the Pulotu, the beginning and the end, which is a translation of our talk a month or so ago with Professor Maui-Ta-Va-He in the Tongan language, and now we would like to switch to the English language to share with our non-Tongan speakers. Without further ado, I would like to pass on to Professor Ka'ili, but Maui-Ta-Va-He-AKo, thank you for your time and your willingness to share always and to come and share your wisdom and your knowledge with our audience and through the Lo'au Multimedia program. I'll pass on to you and then I will join as we go. MALO abito.
MALO abito, Professor Dr. Lo'au Vavanga Kitupua, so saya Sosiwa Laftan. Thank you for the opportunity to continue our conversation, our critical reflection on the some of the important topic to our homeland of Tonga. And today I want to continue our conversation in regards to Pulotu. This is the English version of our Tongan program on the same topic, Pulotu, the beginning and end. As you know, we have been working on this idea that tala o whanua, or the history, stories of the whanua. This is the deep history of the whanua, is a source of history and science. Our ancestors encoded the history and science of our of their historical and scientific knowledge in the Talai Whanua. And our scholarly work is to decode, reveal the historical and the scientific aspect of these of this knowledge that was created by our ancestor. So today we're going to continue to talk about Pulotu and talk about both the historical aspect of Pulotu as well as its scientific aspect. And I will talk about it based on our Talai Whanua, our deep history of the Whanua, which is the land and the people of Tonga. Now I want to go back and begin our Talanoa today with the cosmogony of Tonga, the creation story of Tonga. This is an important aspect because we had a previous conversation about this topic, but I'm returning to it because it is important to contextualize, historicize Pulotu within the context of our cosmogony. And cosmogony is just another scholarly term for the creation story, the origin story of something. And in Tonga, we have our own cosmogony, our own creation story that we had before the arrival of Judeo-Christian creation story that we now have. And the reason why I want to return to this Lo'au Vavanga ki Tupua is because our Puloto is situated within this cosmogony. So in the beginning, according to our cosmogony, there was only Vahanoa, the open sea, and Puloto. Those were the two realms that existed in the beginning, at least of one version of our cosmogony. There are other versions, but this one is the one that many of us have used, and I've written about this in my book. So in the beginning was Wahanoa, the open sea, and also Pulotu. Pulotu is referred to as our ancestral homeland, and also Afterlife, and I'll talk a little bit about this. So out of Wahanoa and Pulotu, limu and kele, seaweed and sediment, emerged from the ocean. They floated in the ocean for eon, pushed by the waves, the currents, and the winds, and finally arrived at Totai in Pulotu, according to the account by Monsieur Mwala, one of our Tongan specialists. So out of Wahanoa and Pulotu, the limu and kele sort of emerged out of the ocean and floated and finally arrive at Pulotu. So here's they arrive at Pulotu, the ancestral homeland. So Pulotu is our ancestral homelands of all Tongans because this is where all things begin. You could probably also think of Wahanoa as our ancestral sea. So Wahanoa is the ancestral sea, our home sea, and Pulotu as the ancestral land or the homeland. So Limu and Kele, one way to think about Limu and Kele is our primordial parents, who in Pulotu gave birth to To'ia Afutuna. To'ia Afutuna is often referred to as a metallic rock or some sort of a rock or a boulder. This is what the first Limu and Kele, seaweed and sea sediment, gave birth to, was To'ia Futuna. This all happened in Pulotu. This is why Pulotu is so significant and important for us as Tongan to always go back and talk about Pulotu. So To'ia Futuna gave birth to 4 sets of twins. These are fraternal twins. The first pair of twins that was given birth by To'ia Futuna, according to the story, To'ia and Futuna went through some sort of trembling and earthquake-like movement, and then out of that came the first set of twins, and that is Piki and Kele. Then it gave birth to the second sets of twins, Atungaki and Maimoa Longanoa. And then the fourth set of twin, Fonuuta and Fonutai. The third set of twin, Fonuuta and Fonutai. And then the fourth set of twin, Hei Moana and Lupe. All of these took place in Pulotu. Yeah, again, these were all the begin here. Now, Piki and Kele, they became the ancestors of Hawea-Hikureo, the grandparents of Hawea-Hikureo. And Hawea-Hikureo, or often just referred to as Hikuleo, is significant because Hikuleo became the ruler, the chiefess of Pulotu. The second set of twin, Atungaki and Maimoa Longanoa, they are the ancestors of the Tangaloas. So all the Tangaloa came through this lineage. And then Fonuuta and Fonutai, they are the ancestors of the grandparents of the Maui, of Maui Motua, but also all of the Maui clans came down in this line. And then Hei, Moana, and Lupe, which we sometimes talk about, but not as often, they became the ancestors of Nafanua, Tafakura, and others. And according to our tradition, they migrated to Samoa. So these are the important set of stories to talk about as far as Puloto. So to go back to the beginning of Tongan history, we have to go back to Wahanoa and Puloto are the two significant places. Loa lineage. Now, in Puloto, our tradition shows that there were two Puloto. Puloto tu'uma'u, or what I call stationary Puloto, and Puloto aka-aka, or motionary Puloto, almost agitated Puloto that was always moving. So these are the two Puloto, and they are hoa in the sense that they are almost the opposite of each other. One is tu'uma'u, to stand still, and the other one is to aka-aka, always moving. And there are some stories about the differences of these two. So there is a gender element here of Havehikuleo that is both male and female, depending on the story. And there might be some interesting area here to research into the fluidity of Havehikuleo. But Taufuli Fonua assigned Havehikuleo to Pulotu. And so Pulotu Havehikuleo or Hikuleo became the Otua, the high chief, the deified chief of Pulotu. So when we talk about Pulotu, Pulotu is always associated with Hikuleo as the ruler, the deified chief, the divinized chief of Pulotu. Of a god, and often this is a reference uh, to to Hikuleo. And in this story, it is also important to point out that in many Tongan tradition, when you hear somebody talks about the Sikota bird, you are it is a reference to Hikureo. Yeah, this is a reference to Hikureo. So those are the sort of kind of the important aspect that I want to start with in our conversation, just to begin our conversation with that. The other areas that I want to also say, and then maybe Loau Vavahanki Tupua can join the conversation, is that Pulotu is located in the west or the northwest of Tonga. where the sun sets. Yeah, so when the sun sets in the west, this is where Pulotu. Sometimes it's referred to as the northwest of Pulotu. Of course, this is the sun sets in the northwest around in the December in the June solstice. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, June solstice is when it's in sets in the northwest, and that's June in Tonga, the winter time of Tonga. And in order to arrive to Pulotu, you have to sail, voyage by Waka. Yeah, and Pulotu is also the realm of the afterlife. So Pulotu is a homeland, ancestral homeland, but also the place of the afterlife. After death, a deceased person has to sail a voyage to Pulotu. A Waka comes from Pulotu to take that person, and that person will then be able to go to Pulotu in that way. So why don't we begin with some of those ideas, and perhaps Loau, Professor Dr. Wavanga Kitupua, so saya Laftani. Those are the first ideas that I like us to sort of maybe discuss, and then we can continue on from those ideas. Loau, Laftani, are you still there?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you, Malo. Sorry, my apology. Yeah, Malo, Obito, Professor Maui-Ta-Va-He-AKo. Yeah, I would like to just add in 2 points, maybe 2 or 3 points, to what you have shared in the beginning of this talk. And then I'll pass on to you to continue.
Okay.
Yeah. You have mentioned the main story about the creation in the Tongan context, Tongan myth, and a story that can be shared by other Polynesians as well in some aspects of its contents. But the form, I think, it's not much different in some Polynesian cultures and myths. One, I think there is a version that Pulotu was different from the stone of Tauia of Futuna in the beginning. Something to be considered.
Yes.
In the creation myth, there is a version that says that in the vast ocean there was this maka, Tauia Futuna, and in the northwestern side or west side, there was Pulotu. And for me, Tauia Futuna was later transformed to Mama, or transformed to Lolofonua. But I think it's just something to take into account, because as the story goes in this version, when in what I call maybe the third creation myth, what's the first 3 men? Ko hai ko au ko momo.
Yeah.
Ko hai ko au ko momo. Another creation myth follow from the original one we are talking about. Their wives were brought from Pulotu. There are some stories that embodies the difference between Pulotu and Tauia Futuna. And in the beginning, Pulotu was different from Mahama, Lolofonua, and Langi. When they started to divide the districts or divide the lands among the gods.
Yes.
So maybe something for us to relook at, because if I'm correct, I overheard that you mentioned Pulotu, everything was taken place in Pulotu, which in this version, the reproduction and our first genealogy or generations, our ancestors, where the activities there were happening at the Maka, at the Tauia of Futuna, at the stone of Tauia Futuna, differently from Pulotu. And as I said, something for us to relook at, because Pulotu was, as time proceeded on, Pulotu was different from where our ancestors resided and where they were produced and reproduced in the beginning, as you recited the first few or fourth generations. Another version that you mentioned, that everything was taking place or happening at Pulotu. The other version I'm sharing with you, that they were different. And when they divided the lands among the courts, Pulotu was still different, continued to be a different place. And in my view, Makatauia Futuna either, that location was either transformed into Mama or transformed into Lolofonua. But as the stories and as our myths continued in later centuries, it reflected more the difference between Pulotu and Mama and Lolofonua and Langi. And there were divisions that were identified in the beginning. Something for us. I am aware of the fact that Pulotu was the main center, because in the creation myth, Pulotu Tauia Futuna. The Fonua, the main Fonua that was already developed was Pulotu. At the time, in the case of telling the story. But this is just something I add in for further consideration. But I'll pass on to you to continue, please, Professor Kail.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Laftani. And I agree with you that during the allocation of Fonua, or the assignment of Fonua, Havehikuleo was assigned to Pulotu. Tangaloa was assigned to Langi, which was a different place from Pulotu. And of course, the Maui were assigned to Lalofonua, and it also appears to be also Mama, that they were given that particular realm. But I think the idea that the was a separate place, and a place that transformed into Mama, that is an area that I think will be good for us to continue our research, and to look at the different versions, and the way that they view Tauia Futuna, because I think that's for further research to look at that particular area. But I thank you for that addition, and for helping us understand that area. The idea that Pulotu is a separate land, or a separate realm, or a separate place, is indicated by the fact that you have to sail to Pulotu through some sort of vaka, that there is a voyage to Pulotu, at least in most of the cosmogonies, the various version. And as I said before, to go to Pulotu, you have to sail through a vaka. And then also, when after someone passed on and they are in the afterlife, to come from Pulotu, you have to also come in the form of a vaka, a vessel such as a fish or bird or plant or other elements of the fonua. Yeah. Professor Hufanga-He-AKo Moelotu has given a scientific view of this. where he sees, humans as a vaka for energy, and that energy resides within humans when humans are alive. But when they pass on, that energy then moves on to another vaka, such as birds or fish or other elements of the fonua. So that energy is loaded into a vaka, unloaded from a vaka, and reloaded to a new vaka. Yeah. So he's giving a scientific view of the way that that energy may be seen, and perhaps a possible interpretation for the way we view Pulotu. But nevertheless, the idea is that Pulotu is a separate homeland, and that this is a place that was there in the beginning of our creation story. Wahanoa and Pulotu were both there, and we see them. And I do like to refer to the Wahanoa as our ancestral sea, our home sea, and Pulotu as our homeland or our ancestral land. So we have ocean and land together as a hoa. They come together as a hoa in the very beginning for at least for us Tongan. Now, in indigenous Tongan religion, the main idea is that spirits, when they or when people pass on, their spirits go to Pulotu, and a lot of scholars refer only to the spirits of the chief. That the chiefs of it's only their spirits that goes to Pulotu, and I'm not sure that I completely agree with this because it seemed to me that there are some story of people's spirits going to Pulotu that weren't chief, but they were just regular people. So it would be interesting to see this evolution in our religion. Perhaps maybe there was a time of the hierarchy that create this hierarchy where only spirits of chiefs went to Puloto. But there are story, for example, the story of uh, you know Tuihatala. You know, all of his brothers all passed on and went to Puloto. I'm not sure if they were chief or they were just regular people. So that seems to be another specific area to explore. But Puloto is the place for the afterlife. Now, Puloto is known for several things. Famous in Puloto is the Viola, which is the living water, the well-being water. Seems to be a water of healing, or also a water for people when they went to Puloto from Mama. They had to go through some cleansing ritual in Viola before they could meet Hikuleo. Or some says that when you go to Viola, if you were a child, you come out as as an adult. So that was an element of Viola that seemed to be associated with some sort of healing, some sort of important aspect for human well-being. And of course, it seemed to me that our hospital in Tonga, the Viola Hospital, is named after this Viola in Pulotu, an important element of Pulotu. So there's some sort of element about Viola in Pulotu that was important in our cosmogony. The other things that also important about Pulotu is akau. There was an akaurea in Pulotu, a talking tree, and this talking tree in Pulotu, according to some tradition, you could have conversation with this tree, and this tree was only existed in Pulotu. So there are a lot of supernatural elements to Pulotu, right? And some of the supernatural elements, including both the Viola and the Akaurea. And in one tradition, that the first sort of kind of kava ceremony or kava drinking ritual happened in Pulotu. Hikureo, Tangaloa, and Maui were partaking of the kava, and one version says that Akaurea was the toa, the kava server of this first kava ceremony. So there appears to be a partaking of kava that originated in Pulotu. And of course, the version that we have today mainly focus on the kava that came out of Eweki. But we see that there was kava drinking that happened in Pulotu, and then we also see that that also happened in Langi, because in the story of Aho-Eitu, when Aho-Eitu arrived in Langi and met up with his father, Tangaloa Etimatupua, the first thing they did was they partake of kava. So that there seem to be some kava stories that appeared in Puloto and Langi before, during the time of Lo'au when he gave the new restructuring or giving a new meaning to the kava. But I want to also sort of kind of point out that Puloto seemed to be also a place where we see kava first served in Puloto in one of our version. Now, the other elements of Puloto that is also important for us to mention is that all chiefly valuable things originate from Puloto. And there are many that we have today that are from Puloto that we still value, highly treasured in Tonga because they originated from Puloto, from the realm of Hikureo. And the following are such as one, the kaho kaho yam, at least one version of our Talai Fonua says that it was brought to Mama by Vaihi Malie. Vaihi Malie was one of the Tongan Fa'aikehe, or supernatural being that went with others to Puloto, had many competition and ended up bringing back the kaho kaho from Puloto. The old fish is also from Puloto, brought back by Lohi. Lohi was another person that went together with Vaihi Malie. Taro was brought also from Puloto and was first cultivated in Eua, according to one Talai Fonua. And then we also know that the Heilala plant, the Heilala flower, the fragrant Heilala, which is considered to be a chief leaf flower, is also from Puloto. So all of these highly chiefly valuable things came from Puloto, and we still revere them today and highly rank them. The way that they are ranked, they are seen as chiefly. Especially when it comes to yams, kaho kaho seems to be the most chiefly because it came from Puloto. Even the Heilala is also seen as a very highly chiefly plant because of its origin and from Puloto and so forth. So that's another element of Puloto that we see today, and then it continues on in where we're at. And the other area that I want to also mention about Puloto is that there seemed to be that there was a high level of performing arts that was cultivated and also